Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It hasn't been the easiest few days for the BBC, but all the same, the news that its chair, Rona Fairhead, was stepping down came as something of a surprise tonight, especially given the fact that she'd only just been reappointed by David Cameron. There are reports that Miss Fairhead was forced out by the Prime Minister Theresa May. If so, are we just witnessing a cull of anyone who was ever on civil terms with Mr Cameron, or is there more to it than that? And more importantly, should a new Prime Minister really be intervening in this way?
Turmoil at the top. The BBC is looking for a new chair tonight after its current boss appears to have fallen out with the Prime Minister. Rona Fairhead was appointed by David Cameron, but in yet another sign that she's asserting her authority, Theresa May demanded the BBC chair should reapply for her job. She declined. In a statement tonight, she said, "The Prime Minister strongly encouraged me to take part in the new appointment process for what would be a new 4-year term as BBC chairman. However, after much thought, I have come to the conclusion that I should not do so." In reply, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport said the government thanks Rona Fairhead for her service to the BBC. Full details of the BBC Charter will be announced shortly. Hardly very warm words and an indication that Theresa May is in no way sorry to see her go. Certainly Rona Fairhead was a staunch defender of the corporation, warning last year about the dangers of political interference.
I think that any risk of any perception that there is governmental interference or political interference has the risk of having a chilling effect on the organisation and preventing it doing one of its core duties.
But standing up for the corporation is something that after just 2 years in the job, she will now no longer be able to do.
And Libby is here. Late breaking story tonight, really this, Libby. But you've been speaking to people at Westminster. What's the general reaction?
Well, I think the first thing to say, Tom, is that Theresa May was perfectly entitled to ask Rona Fairhead to reapply for her job, and that job was changing. She was chair of the BBC Trust, which is largely a supervisory role. It was becoming the chairman of a board, effectively running the BBC. And what I understand from government sources is that Mrs May wanted to see someone in there who could take charge, and effectively she wanted to run a competition so that Rona Fairhead applied, but there were other people who were going to apply, and she felt she was well within her rights to do that. In fact, there's some suggestion that she actually thought that David Cameron was being a bit lazy, actually just keeping Rona Fairhead in the job in the transition period. I think people close to David Cameron would suggest it was rather sensible to have some sort of continuity. Nevertheless, I think people overall are pretty surprised that it's happened so quickly, and I understand that it was due to be announced on Thursday. In fact, clearly there was so little love lost between Rona Fairhead and the Prime Minister, she decided to go tonight.
OK, Libby, thank you very much indeed. How about one of those quirks of coincidence, or not, depending on your point of view? The announcement of Rona Fairhead's resignation followed hot on the heels of the departure of the Great British Bake Off to Channel 4. But the two hosts, Sue Perkins and Mel Giedroyc, announced they would not be going with it. They said they loved being part of the show and seeing it rise like a pair of yeasted Latvian baps, as they put it, but were not going with the dough. The question then, perhaps, does its move represent a good deal for Channel 4 or a rash gamble?
Bakers, it's bread week.
With their cooking innuendo,
your dough prodded by Paul Hollywood's digits of doom.
Comic pair Mel and Sue have been among the key ingredients of this remarkably successful show.
And whose bread week?
You're not alone.
Will be their last.
Oh, no!
But they won't be following the Bake Off to Channel 4. In a statement typical of their tongue-in-cheek style, the duo said, "The BBC nurtured the show from its infancy and helped give it its distinctive warmth and charm. We've loved seeing it rise and rise like a pair of yeasted Latvian baps. We're not going with the dough."
I think it says that Mel and Sue like working for the BBC, or liked it being on the BBC, and they might also think that, you know, that its days are numbered.
what you do with the cron, you twist it and then join it.
Love Productions says it wasn't about the money, but the BBC would disagree. Under pressure from the government over its charter renewal, it couldn't justify the extra costs.
It's thought the BBC offered around £15 million a year for the programme. That's double what it already pays for the show and its spin-offs. It's believed Love Productions wouldn't take anything less than £25 million a year.
Is it helping that we're all...
Channel 4 is in the middle of its own battle with the government over privatisation. Some would argue at bidding, a public broadcaster undermines its case to retain its own unique model. And tonight, it's still not clear whether Paul Hollywood and Mary Berry will sign up, leaving the broadcaster with a big challenge of how to come up with another recipe for success. Nazanin Mashiri, News at 10.
Well, Nick's here with some other political news. Now, first of all, the story about the chair of the BBC Trust, who is tonight, she is no longer the chair of the BBC Trust.
Well, chair for a few months longer, but Rona Fairhead has announced that she will stand down as chair of the BBC Trust next year. She had been reappointed to by David Cameron to the role, which will obviously change in the new year when the Trust is replaced by a new unitary authority. Now, in a sign of how Theresa May really wants to do things in her own way, Fairhead was told that she would have to reapply for the post, a post that she has recently been appointed to. And in a statement to the FT, Fairhead said that she had been strongly encouraged by Theresa May to apply for this post, but after much thought, she had decided to go her own way.
So what does this tell us about Theresa May?
Well, as I understand it, Theresa May was unamused by the way in which Rona Fairhead was sort of reappointed on the nod, as one Whitehall source put it to me. And what this shows is that Theresa May believes that when it comes to big appointments and big decisions, there needs to be a much more rigorous process. So, for example, she's reviewing the Hinkley C process, and on this one, she has been listening to the Commons Culture Select Committee, which raised strong concerns about the way in which David Cameron had made this reappointment. Important to say, this comes 2 days before the publication of the draft charter for the BBC, and Rona Fairhead was at the heart of those negotiations.
Nick, thank you very much indeed.
I've been getting away with it all.